Okay, hello everyone. It's Antiquated Ideas, and today I have a video that's, um, it's a rather uh, serious topic, I guess. And even though, and trust me, I don't want to jinx it or anything, um, but the topic is about mass shootings and more specifically my opinion on it, where I think people don't talk about it, and where I notice that a lot of people really seem like they're afraid to find the root of this topic. All they want to do is talk about, as an example, oh, more gun control, common sense gun control, things like that. Well, anyway, if you can hear it in the background, my neighbor is power washing their house, so I apologize if you hear that, and hopefully the audio is more correct in this video. So anyway, let's just dive into it. The reason that I decided to go ahead and make this video comes from two parts. One is that, and I posted this on my blog a couple times, I've talked about it. I have a theory as to why young men, especially white, go out and behave violently. And two is that I recently watched Brandon Herrera's video entitled Mass Shootings, an Unpopular Opinion, where he talks about the root issue of mass shootings being violence and evil itself. He also talks about, and this is something that I get into later, he also talks about how in a way he's happy, not I shouldn't say happy, but that it's better that people are going out and using guns, because if you think about it, violence committed in other countries, especially the United Kingdom, where guns are outlawed for the most part, violence takes much more brutal forms, and there can be a lot of outside casualties, collateral, in a way, things that just make it so much worse. And I thought that that was a really interesting topic, and that's sort of what made me want to go out and actually make this video specifically about mass shootings. Now, Brandon and I seem to share an opinion, at least when it comes to one of the root causes being masculinity, more specifically, the lack thereof. Unfortunately, it truly seems as though each generation is taught less and less about how to express their masculinity in a natural way. When you think about being a man, one of the defining characteristics are the hormones that a man has, right? An example of this is clearly the surplus of testosterone that men have. Men are prone to competition, violence, and I hesitate to say it, but traditional displays of masculinity. Men like to show off their strength or physical prowess, and honestly, that's fine. It might not be every guy, but I would say that all real men like to do it in one way or another, even if they don't talk about it. Besides, it's rewarding to work on building up your body. But before I start venturing off topic, the issue is that men are being restricted. These pseudo psychologists and therapists and feminist leaders who come out and say that boys can't even be boys anymore. The absolute emphasis in education systems on peace and equality. These things destroy men. Just in the example of equality, my own father thought it was a joke that schools hand out participation trophies, and that's pretty common in older generations. In nature, there needs to be a clear winner and loser, and sometimes those lines are blurred, the definitions are different, but there's nothing wrong with having either. Just because you win once doesn't mean that you're going to win again. Losing just gives you the opportunity to build your strength. Yet, we have this overly feminized and civil world that we've built where you need to tread lightly for fear of offending someone. Now, the way that I see it is that being offended by something is 90% of the time going to be your problem, not the person who said something. These things do not bode well for the male psyche. Every aspect of ourselves is misrepresented or suppressed. Yes, we do need to teach men not to fall into the trap of the cowboy stereotype, unfeeling man, because men have feelings, and a real man is one who is able to come to terms with his emotion and express them properly. But that does not mean that you need to force men into these situations where you essentially baby them. Men need to learn to deal with their feelings, their emotions, and know when the right time is to actually talk to someone. And a short side note is that men really need to be accepting of talking about that. They need to have friends who are willing to talk about serious things. Um, but when you look at schools, they pander to everyone. It's the make everyone happy approach. Even in early grade schools, they stop kids from roughing around. I mean, when I was in elementary school, I could see that. We used to go from playing dodgeball to not even being allowed to touch the dodgeballs. Or then it was we couldn't play tackle football. And we had a pull up bar, right? And then one day they said, oh, well, you can't use the pull up bar anymore. And then all of a sudden, they start teaching us yoga and dance instead of the usual sports that we would play. This idea that boys can't play rough is ludicrous. If you teach a boy from a young age that he cannot be a boy and then shove all this bullshit about gender in his face, all you're going to do is confuse and suppress the true man inside of him. This is why boys become violent. It's a natural reaction to the unnatural world around them. I wish that I could better get this point across, and I wish that we're accepted before more people choose to lash out and harm others. A short point relating to this is that I believe white men do it and are especially targeted. In school, education has become more and more about what the minorities did and less about what the whites did. There's not even room to ask what your European ancestors did because often schools will look past it or make you feel as though it's not an appropriate question. Plus, when you even take a brief look at the media, which is a part of our everyday lives, we can see it. There are literally people out on the streets vying for more minority rights when they're already equal in the eyes of the law. We shouldn't need things like quotas for school to fill because it isn't the American education system's problem whether or not someone of color wants to get educated. There shouldn't be specifics in regards to that. But yet, you still see them on the streets with their your grandchildren will be mixed signs or whatever it is that they choose. Media platforms like Netflix, they go out of their way to include one character from every color of the rainbow, a black, an Asian, a disabled person, a gay, and whatever other LGBT nonsense they want to include. There is no way for me to agree with this. And it's incredibly easy for someone of color to call a white man racist and get away with it because our whole culture is centered around catering to the fragile feelings of those who might be offended. No wonder white men lash out, violently no less, against a system when I feel that it's being designed against them. More and more each generation. They have no one to turn to in order to express these feelings, and I genuinely think that if they were allowed to express both being men and being white, we would see a drastic reduction in violence. But I digress. A point that Brandon Herrera touched on, and one that I firmly believe in, is that these dumbass waiting periods and restrictions will do nothing to stop violence. I'm sure you've heard people from the NRA or wherever say that gun restrictions only hurt lawful gun owners, and that's incredibly true. if you want to buy a gun, and not even talking about guns, but if you want to buy a gun, there's a million ways that somebody's going to find that gun, whether it's legal or not. But the problem lies elsewhere within society, and many refuse to even take a look at that. They don't want to admit the possibility that we made a mistake with our schooling and our society, and they don't want to fix it, and that costs lives. Look at the United Kingdom, whose supposed melting pot is going to boil over in their faces. They have huge rates of violence, ranging from people stabbing each other with simple kitchen utensils to people throwing literal acid at each other. They use bombs, vehicles, knives, pipes, or anything else just because they want to harm someone. They want to kill people. Guns are barely legal in the United Kingdom. They literally had to restrict the sale of knives. All that politicians do is dance around the real issue at hand, and even that is far more complex than the confines of this video. I mean, I could go on for some time about my personal opinions on what causes these things, but here I feel that I've laid an appropriate baseline. To conclude this video, I don't want people to get hurt. I don't think anyone in their right mind wants that. Nor do I think that anyone needs to get hurt. Sure, a little bar fight or whatever is going to happen. There's always going to be crime. But there doesn't need to be an issue as large as the one we have at hand. And the solution is not banning or restricting things. If that were true, I mean, you might as well place everyone in a straitjacket, and even then we would find ways to kill each other. If they restrict guns, it can't stop there. They would need to get rid of kitchen cleaning products, knives, cars, books, building materials, tools, etc. It's just absurd that we are so focused on being a non-violent society that it's having the complete opposite result. And it makes sense. If you back an animal into a corner, it will attack. And that's where we stand. If you agree with this video and the things that I've talked about, I urge you to talk about this to other people. It doesn't make for an easy conversation. People don't want to think about this, and frankly, a lot of them have been taught not to. But I think that it's essential. I mean, it is essential. We need to get to the root of the problem. We have to pull it out. You aren't going to get the satisfaction of being the ultimate people pleaser, but in the long run, talking about real problems, about something like this, literally will save lives. So I just want you to think about that. I want you to go ahead and do some research on your own. Go on Google and spend more than 5 minutes. Look at more than just the first 3 search results, because as we all know, Google likes to bury things. So I really do. I urge you, I implore you to go ahead and talk about this. Get that message out there that there's more to this system of violence, this culture of violence, as people have called it before, because that's not who we are. Most people don't want violence. So if you like this video, please feel free to check out my blog. That's in my bio. So is my PayPal and my Patreon if you would like to donate to me. Thank you.